Clarita's hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Prima Pediatrics Healthcare Hour. You can go to primapediatrics.net for more information on them. You can also give them a call, 424-9000. We have Dr. Feldman in studio, and we were talking about ads and then and now. We started talking about smoking and how it's weird how, I think it's odd too, that people like still smoke because there's no secret about how horrible they are for you. So that's one of the oddities. But we were looking through some old ads. We want to talk about medicine then and now. And you saw some old ads that had Coca-Cola ads or cola ads.
Right.
That said, get your kids drinking soda early so they fit in when they're preteens or something along those lines.
Yes, that's exactly it. There's studies show that.
That's good.
And, it's quite possible they were correct that the studies show that they fit in better because they were much more hyper and more voluble and God knows what. Of course, now we know that sugary drinks are about the last thing you want to give your kid. I mean, they might have fit in then when everybody was a lot heavier. They ain't going to fit in now. And they're going to be a lot more obese.
Yeah.
Not to mention the fact, of course, of all the issues of lack of nutrition and the carbonation and carbonic acid that eats up the teeth and all the other wonderful things about sodas that are really not good.
Nothing good about
kids.
them except for the taste is what I always say.
That is correct. That is correct. Not that it can't be an occasional treat.
Yeah.
But it should never be part of a kid's diet.
Is there an age limit when you should never give your kids? It's at young. How young is too young to give your kids soda?
I would say, in my viewpoint, there are a lot of people who say you never give your kids soda. Period.
Well, yeah, of course.
Okay, but I would say that under age 2 is ridiculous.
Okay.
And the only time I think it would be okay is if you were using colas, a sweetened cola that you'd flattened in the microwave and put ice into as an electrolyte drink because you couldn't get the Pedialyte.
Gotcha.
Couldn't get to the store the Pedialyte, and you had Coke in the house, and the kid was puking.
Gotcha.
That's the only time I would consider it to be reasonable. Otherwise, it is not reasonable.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that's, But, then everybody thought it was fine. But not anymore. But you also have to realize that was the age. And, I hate to admit it. No, I don't hate to admit it. I'm ready to admit it. I remember, I'm very lucky in the fact that I have what's called an eidetic memory, which means it's almost photographic, meaning I have pictures in my mind from when I was very, very, very small. I can remember as far back as actually to the time I was about 18 months.
Wow.
To a pre-verbal area. There's one memory I have that it's a real one because nobody ever told me about it, so I know it's real. And even when I grew up, I told my parents about it, and they said, "Oh my God, how did you know that?" So, I do have memories of when I was quite young. And what I remember most about my first 4 years of life, until I was about 4.5, a little over 4, was that my parents would never let us go to Edgemont Park, which was the amusement park in Detroit, where I grew up, in the months of August and September, nor would they let us go to the beach or any of the places like that, because it was polio season. And I remember that very well. I also remember standing in line with my parents for what seemed like an interminably long time to a 4-year-old while we waited in a very long line of parents and kids to get our first polio shots. A, I couldn't get why I had to stand in line. B, I couldn't understand why anybody would stand in line to get a shot.
It's one thing to wait in line, but it's another thing to wait in line just to get poked by something that hurt really bad.
I just couldn't get it as a kid, but I understood it much later. And but I remember standing in line for the first polio shots, which were discovered in 1954. Which was when I was 3 years old, and became available to the public in 55, which was when I was 4. And then I also recall very clearly standing in line at school to get the oral polio vaccine, which was the Sabin rather than the Salk that came out, and I must have been 57. Yeah, it was discovered in 57 and made available in 58 because I was 7 years old. And that's when we all stood in line at school, and we stood in line, they gave us these sugar cubes with this pink stuff on it. It's actually pretty good tasting, and I thought, why didn't they do this first?
This This is much less invasive than getting stabbed by something.
And it tasted good, so
Yeah.
it was good. But in the meantime, though, I remember getting the polio vaccines. I also clearly recall in my kindergarten class that there was a boy. I remember his name was Silver. His last name was Silver. He had red hair, and he walked with crutches because he had had polio.
Wow.
I also remembered that the rabbi of our synagogue also walked with a limp because he had had polio. And I remember very clearly hearing and seeing pictures of Franklin Roosevelt, who had also had polio.
Yeah.
Polio was a big thing,
Yeah.
and it was prevalent. And it was considered an absolute miracle from God that we were able to get this vaccine. And yet today, there are thousands upon thousands of parents who think that this is a scourge,
Yeah.
who have no idea what a difference it has made in the lives of everybody in the world. No concept of what they are discouraging, what they're not getting for their kids, because polio is still around.
Yeah.
In fact, it's become much more rampant now than ever before.
Is it more? I don't want to say like super, but I don't know how to explain it. Is it more like potent, or is
No.
it a bigger worry if you do get it?
No, but it's a big enough worry.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the thing about polio, like all the other enteroviruses, which means they're in the gut, is that, 80% of the time, if you get it, you get nothing more than a stomach flu. But 20% of the time, you end up paralyzed and you die from not being able to breathe because the breathing muscles are paralyzed. I remember visiting kids I knew that were in iron lungs. And I do recall this. And people who aren't as old as I am, which obviously I've given away my age, don't recall this. So they have no concept of what it really means. And I mean, in a way that's good, but in a way that's not so good because people are refusing polio vaccines now. And because of the wars in Africa and all of the unrest in the Middle East, polio has now spread from it. Previously, it had been only rampant in India and in Pakistan, and it had not been seen for 10 years in any other region in the world.
Wow.
And we were so close to completely
Just
eradicating
annihilating
it.
Yeah.
And bang, with all the unrest that's happened, it's now all over the Middle East. It's now all over Africa. And, we are in the jet age where people visit Africa and the Middle East and they come back with it.
Yeah.
And that's not good. I personally know about this even more so because I have grandchildren who are growing up in Israel. And in Israel, even though they all got their inactivated polio vaccines, the Israel Public Health Administration has insisted they went through and re-immunized their entire population with oral polio vaccine because they found wild virus polio in the waters and in the soil in Gaza. And that is immediately adjacent to Israel. So out of an abundance of caution, they have re-immunized everyone with the oral vaccine because it confers herd immunity, whereas the inactivated doesn't. So, people think that vaccines are a scourge. Well, they got to remember medicine now and then. What we used to think was okay is not okay, and what we think is okay now is maybe not okay.
Yeah.
So that's part and parcel of the story. And then of course we have one, this one was hilarious. I loved this ad. FET, the enemy that is shortening your life, banished. How? With sanitized tapeworms.
Oh my gosh.
Now that one I don't recall because I believe it's from the early 20th century. I'm not that old. But can you imagine?
Oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh. They said, well, tapeworms did cause people to lose weight.
It certainly did, yeah.
I clearly recall that a little boy that was in my nursery school class and who I was friends with all through elementary school and whose parents were my parents' friends, his dad was always so skinny and it took them ages to figure out that he had tapeworms and he had to take medicine, eventually got better. But he wasn't
heavens.
taking them to lose weight, but he sure
yeah.
as heck did lose
Yeah.
weight.
All right. Oh, gosh. Well, we're going to take a break. We're going to
Okay.
take a break. We'll come back with more, not more tapeworms, hopefully. Well, maybe. Maybe we'll touch on some tapeworms. But more.
No, we'll talk about the next one, which is even more fun.
Yeah. More medicine then and now on AM 1220 KHTS. The Prima Pediatrics Healthcare Hour on AM 1220 KHTS.